Wow, I actually did it. I'm in math. This is awesome. It's okay, nothing can hurt me here. Wait a second. Hi everybody and welcome to another episode of Lost in Math. I'm Mr. Wheeler. Today we're talking about solving quadratic equations by factoring. We have 5 ways to solve quadratic equations. On our last video we learned how to solve them by graphing. Today we're learning how to solve them by factoring. And then there's 3 more ways that you don't have to worry about yet. So factoring. Hopefully we all remember how to factor. And assuming you remember how to factor, we also have to use the zero product property. The zero product property states that if you're multiplying 2 numbers together and get out a 0, one of those numbers has to be 0. There's no other way to multiply 2 numbers together and get a 0 unless one of them is 0. You can think about it for a second. But it's impossible. One of them must be 0. If a times b equals 0, either a is 0 or b is 0. It's the only way it can happen. On our notes, our first example asks us to use the zero product property to solve. The problem says x minus 3 times x plus 7 equals 0. X minus 3 and x plus 7, those are both numbers. They look weird, but they're still numbers. If I told you x was 10, that would just turn into 7 times 17, one number times another number. And the zero product property says that if I'm multiplying 2 numbers together and get out a 0, one of them must equal 0. So to solve this problem, either x minus 3 equals 0 or x plus 7 equals 0. That's the only way for this problem to work. So both those turn into one-step equations. I could solve them really fast. So x would equal 3 or x would equal negative 7. Those would be 2 possible solutions to this problem. And you should always check to be sure. So I'll check my answers really fast. Let editing guy handle that. I'll be back. So it worked. 3 and negative 7 were my 2 answers to that problem. On the bottom of our notes, we have 2 more problems that are similar. So why don't you take a moment and try and solve those. On B, x plus 4 times x minus 3 equals 0. So x plus 4 must equal 0, or x minus 3 must equal 0. Solve both those one-step equations. And I get my answers of x equals negative 4 or x equals positive 3. On C, 2x minus 6 times x minus 2 equals 0. Either 2x minus 6 equals 0 or x minus 2 equals 0. 2x minus 6 is a 2-step equation, but that's the only difference. I solve them the same way. Isolate x. So my answers are x equals 3 or 2. So that's all well and good, but in our problems, our quadratic equations are written in standard form, hopefully. ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. They're not written like a binomial times a binomial. But luckily, we can change quadratics into a binomial times a binomial by factoring. So our first example, x squared plus 7x plus 10 equals 0. First we factor. Factors of 10 that add up to 7, 5, and 2. So I can factor that quadratic in an x plus 5 times x plus 2 equals 0. Now it looks like the problems that we just did on the front of our notes. So either x plus 5 equals 0 or x plus 2 equals 0, thanks to the zero product property. Solve a couple one-step equations. So my solutions to this quadratic problem would be x equals -5 or -2. So there's a bunch of examples on the bottom of our notes, 4 of them. We factor the problems, use the zero product property to find our solutions, and we're done. So why don't you take a moment, see if you can factor and solve those problems. Example B, x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. When I factored it, it turned into x plus 1 times x plus 1 equals 0. So either x plus 1 equals 0 or x plus 1 equals 0. So when I solve my one-step equations, minus 1, minus 1. X equals -1 or -1, that's the same number. So we just write x equals -1. Remember on quadratics, sometimes we get 2 answers, sometimes we get 1 answer, sometimes we can get no answers. So on this one, we got 1 answer, and that was at x equals -1. On C, x squared minus 6x plus 5 equals 0. We factor that. D, x squared minus 5x minus 36 equals 0. That factors into x minus 9 times x plus 4 equals 0. So set them both equal to 0. Solve. So x equals positive 9 or x equals -4 would be my solutions. On E, x squared plus 2x equals 8. This is not written in standard form. Standard form, it has to equal 0 in order to do factoring. And the zero product property, our problems must be written in standard form. They must equal 0. We can't use the zero product property if our product doesn't equal 0. So very important, must be written in standard form before we can do this method. So on this problem, in order to get it in standard form, I could subtract 8 from both sides. 8 minus 8 is 0, equals 0. And on the left-hand side, my problem would be x squared plus 2x minus 8 equals 0. And now I can do it like normal. Factor, so that turns into x plus 4 times x minus 2 equals 0. Solve. So I get my answers of x equals -4 or positive 2. So that wraps up our notes on solving quadratic equations by factoring. Be sure it's written in standard form first. Remember how to factor. Then we use the zero product property, so we get two things multiplying each other. That should equal 0, so set them both equal to 0 and solve. We can get 2 answers, 1 answer, or no answers. Not all problems will be factorable. If it's not factorable, we'll need another method to solve it, but we'll deal with that later. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Click like if you did. Don't forget to subscribe so you're not missing a thing. And I'll see you guys later. Bye, guys. We have 5 ways to solve quadratic equations. Yesterday, technically, factoring. In order to do this, you have to remember how to factor.
I'm hit.
And assuming you remember how to factor, also comes down to and assuming you remember how to factor, it also comes down to something called, I don't like how that sounds. So a times b if so 5, then that would be 5 minus 3, and that would be 2 times 5 plus 7, 12. If I told you x equaled 10, then that problem would turn into 7 times 17. No, yes it would. Why doubt yourself, man? You had it. So on B, why unpause? So that's all well and good, but our problems, our quadratic